Sometimes it can feel as if time is just slipping away. Or maybe when you reflect on your past, you might wonder where all the time went. And sometimes the days feel really long and the years feel super fast. And this is why I invited TED speaker and author Laura Vanderkam on the podcast today. In this enlightening conversation, we talked about why we need to be intentional with how we spend our time so life doesn't just pass us by. This is a really important conversation for everyone. And while time may be a limited resource, you have more than you may realize. You just need to be paying attention. And like I always say, change only happens within community. So if you're listening, it's time to join the Facebook group Empowered Educator Faculty Room. Because if you enjoy this podcast, you'll love the Facebook group where you'll get live workshops, giveaways, insights, and where we can celebrate you throughout your empowered journey. You belong here in the Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook. Remember all the passion and vision you had when you first went into teaching? Feeling like building young minds and creating community through your work would make a lasting impact on this world? Well, those days may feel like they're behind you now because you're exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed and frustrated. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be like this. In fact, the love of teaching never really went away. But it absolutely needs transformation. Welcome to the Take Notes podcast. I'm Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, mom of two, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, and I'm here to light the way for you. In order to create a generational change for our kids, we need to shift the paradigm away from the perpetual stress and overwhelm and into a life of joy and fulfillment. This is Education 2.0, where you become the priority, shift how you live your life, and how you show up both at work and at home. So take a sip of steamy morning coffee and grab your notebook. It's time to take notes. Hello, and welcome to another fabulous episode of Take Notes. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation with Laura Vanderkam, who is the author of several time management and productivity books, including the new Tranquility by Tuesday, 9 Ways to Calm the Chaos and Make Time for What Matters Most, along with Juliet's School of Possibilities, Off the Clock, I Know How She Does It, What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and 168 Hours. Her work has appeared in publications including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and Fortune. And she is the host of the podcast Before Breakfast and the co-host with Sarah Hart-Unger of the podcast Best of Both Worlds. She lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and 5 children and blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Laura, thank you so much for joining me and the Take Notes audience today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I would love to just dive in and talk about particularly time with teachers, because I know for me, I didn't realize my relationship with time until I actually stepped away from the classroom, and time was very conflated with productivity. And it felt like every single minute needed to have something filled inside of it. And so as people have these kind of laundry list days like teachers do, can you talk a little bit about how we can even approach our day looking at it as kind of this laundry list thing? Because that is not healthy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do have a lot we have to get done. So in that sense, that's understandable. But I think the thing that is so challenging with time is that it keeps passing no matter what you do. Right. And so you're going to be on the other side of this school day. You're going to be on the other side of this week. You'll be on the other side of the school year, soon enough. Because of that, it can feel like you're just kind of constantly pushing along on this river, right? That it just keeps flowing and there's nothing you can do about it. And so you're trying to frantically get the things that you can done. And that's not going to change in the sense the river isn't going to change. Like it is going to keep going. But we have to build in time into our lives to kind of stand outside the river for a little bit and note the shape of it, how it's moving, how fast it's going at different places, any tricky spots, sort of broadly what the lay of the land looks like. And so it does come down to spending a little bit of time thinking about the time that is coming up ahead of us. Like, what is actually important? What do I truly need to get through? What would make this look like a good week? What would make this look like a good day? How can I make sure those happen while still being open to opportunity in other moments as they arise?
Yeah. And I think something you talk about is getting in touch with your future you. And I imagine that part of understanding even what those answers to those questions are, what would a good day look like? What does a good week feel like? You would probably have to get in touch with that. So what is a process for you, or how do you describe that
in setting up your week and really taking a look at those questions? How do you suggest people even approach those questions?
Well, when you are doing sort of a weekly planning process, what I definitely recommend for everyone, I do this on Fridays. I know that may or may not work with people's teaching schedules, but if you do have a little bit of time on, say, Friday first thing in the morning or later in the day or something like that, but some time where you sit and look at the upcoming week and ask yourself, what is most important to me professionally in the upcoming week, right? So what would make this look like a good week at school? Personally, what would make this look like a good week within the categories of like my relationships? What would make this feel like I had really hit it out of the park in terms of my relationships over the next week? And then personally, what is most important to me personally over the next week? And then you look at your calendar and you figure out, well, where can those things go? Where would those priorities fit within my week as it exists? Then you look at what you have to do. What is already on your calendar? What are the things that you are committed to over the next week? You get yourself a rough idea of how you're going to tackle those things. You then think about what you are most looking forward to over the next week, making sure there are some things that make life feel doable and joyful over the next week. And then, you solve any logistical problems. You see if there's anything that you don't want to do that's on your calendar for the next week, if that can possibly go. So we're focused on what are truly the most important things. But having that little bit of time to ponder those top level priorities beyond just sort of like, okay, we're going through unit 3.2. Right? It's a gift you can give your future self.
Yeah. Well, I've been reading your work for a long time, and something that has really resonated with me that I continue to share all the time, it's whenever we say, I don't have the time, what you're really saying is that it's not a priority. And that really resonates with me to my core, because you hear that all the time, especially in the education space. It's like, well, I would love to do all these things, but I don't have the time. And that's just simply not true, because at least from the way that you're just describing it is if you kind of carve out some space to even make those priorities, you can actually have time for everything you want.
I do believe we have more time than we think. And yeah, the language that I don't have time really means it's not a priority that sounds a little harsh. But if people think about it, it's probably true. Like whatever you're telling yourself, I don't have time for. Like if somebody offered to give you $100,000 to do it, like, it might wise up the priority list pretty quickly, right? You're like, oh, guess I found time after all, right? So it wasn't a matter of lacking time. It's that you didn't want to do it within the context of your life as it currently is. Or if you think about things, this happens in larger groups too. If you think about your school or your district or whatever you're saying you don't have time to do that we can't focus on right now. Like if your district got some huge, many, many millions of dollars of grants to do whatever that thing is, people might suddenly decide it's a priority, right? Like, again, it could rise up the list under the right circumstances. What we're saying is that right now, given what my life looks like, it is not a priority. And I think it's important that we own that truth, because that's part of taking control of time. Time is not just happening to us. We don't have to just, blindly float down this river, even though it does keep moving. We have some degree of control over how we direct ourselves down if we're strategic.
Well, and that agency is so important for you to realize, because again, that you're not letting life happen to you. You're co-creating and designing what kind of life you want to make it work for you in this way. And so getting really honest about those questions can be really confronting.
It can. Yeah. And I think to be fair here, obviously people have very different tough circumstances and all that. We can come up with various ways that this may not be the case and, all that. Like, yes, it truly may not work with whatever. But just because not everything in the universe is under our control doesn't mean nothing is. Right. And I think people can talk themselves into these corners about it. Like, well, I can't change X, Y, or Z. Therefore, oh, well, throw up my hands. What can I do except keep floating along? But, we don't have to accept that. We say, well, what are the parts of my life that I can have control over? And then think about your priorities within that.
That's why I really love this latest book that you wrote, is because it's so concrete and it's so laid out so beautifully, not just with the reason why behind all of the rules, but the practical applications. And I really love how you address the objections right away. So when someone's like, well, I really can't do that, you're like, actually, people said this, and this is kind of how we navigated through that. And then there was obviously these beautiful places for accountability and action steps. So I would really love to kind of go through some of the not all of them, but I would like to go through some of these rules because I think this is really great information for the listeners to know. And it ties into what you're saying here about getting really honest with yourself about what you consider to be a priority or not with your time within reasonable circumstances, of course. But something like sleep, right? This idea of giving yourself a bedtime that you say is rule number one. So often it's like, well, sleep becomes the last priority. And you put that as rule one, the first thing that we need to do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to back up, Tranquility by Tuesday is about 9 of my favorite time management rules that I really think are broadly applicable. I mean, just about everyone could get some benefit from using these rules in their lives. And the first rule, the first of the 9, is to give yourself a bedtime. And people are like, what? That's rule number 1? Like that, I thought it was going to be something more interesting than that. I had 150 people try out these rules over the course of 9 weeks to see if they really worked, right? And many of the challenges that they talked about were then I could address in the book. And so this is how real people interacted with these rules, and not just in my head how I thought they would work, but how they work for real people. And as one person put it, this was the least sexy, but the most impactful rule. Like, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know that, like, oh, yes, sleep is generally a good thing. It would behoove me to get an adequate amount of sleep. But I think what a lot of us do is we skimp during the week. Teachers often have to be up very early, whether you have your kids that you got ready for school, you then have to start school as well at often extremely early times. And then, there's a million things you could be doing later at night, right? It's like, oh, well, that's the time I could grade my papers. That's the time I could actually relax and enjoy myself once my kids are in bed. I've done my chores. Now I can watch TV and I don't want to stop that to go to bed. And so we wind up skipping during the week, which then makes us more and more crabby as the week goes on. And then you binge on sleep on the weekend, if at all possible. People crash on Friday night, or they sleep in on Saturday and Sunday morning, or sometimes it even happens earlier than that. People fall asleep on the couch on Wednesday night or sleep through their alarm on Thursday morning, or whatever else it is that happens. That's your body saying, okay, well, we need a certain amount of sleep, and we're going to try to get it over the course of a week or two. But what we're going to wind up doing is substituting sleep for other activities that you might want to do. So you don't actually save time by skipping during the week. You're just pushing the sleep forward in a way that really messes with your energy levels and your ability to do anything. So it's so much better to get the amount of sleep you need every single night. It is not rocket science. If you need to wake up at 6 a.m. and you need 8 hours of sleep, then your bedtime is 10 p.m. If you need 7 hours of sleep, your bedtime is 11 p.m. Like 7.5, it's 10:30, right? Again, it's just math. Count back. All good. But if you do this and don't move it by more than an hour or so on weekends, it is completely transformative. Like, there is nothing like waking up 2 minutes before your alarm in the morning, because this is actually how much sleep you need, and you're done. You're ready. You're ready for the day. It's just really quite magical, actually.
Yeah, that sounds great. And your face is lighting up when you're talking about this because I can tell you are reaping the benefits of it yourself. And even this idea of just waking up 2 minutes before your alarm, I can maybe count the times that's happened on one hand and still have fingers left over. But you're right. And I do want to address too, like you said, we kind of have this thing where it's like we need to steal time almost at the end of the day. I read something on NPR recently. It was some article that popped up about like the scrolling that we do before bed. It's kind of like getting the time back that we feel like we missed out on during the day, like for us. So we get it right before we go to bed. But that bedtime is sacred.
Yeah. I mean, you're an adult. If you have a really good reason to stay up, like you got concert tickets to some hot act, go for it, right? Like if you've got a good reason to be up late, but scrolling around, not necessarily. I mean, that stuff's all going to still be there tomorrow. Like Facebook will still be there if you would like to go peruse it later. And it's also like how many people don't look at it at all during the day and only get that time at night. Basically, you're just adding to the amount of time you spent on it. And it's not very high quality me time anyway. Like I want people to have lots of me time in their life. I want them to feel that they have lots of time for themselves so that they don't have to stay up late in order to get that low quality version of it.
Yeah. And it is totally low quality me time. It's like zone out zombie time sometimes, right? And especially right before bed. And that actually kind of ties into something that I wanted to ask you about with rule 9, which is effortful before effortless. And this idea of changing your relationship with leisure. This is something I think ties into a whole lot of things that you talked about throughout the book of prioritizing yourself in a different kind of way. and looking at the things that bring us joy and maybe are healthy for us, like sleep, like spending time with our family, like the going on adventures, which is something else we can talk about later. Really adjusting your relationship with those things.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the stories we tell ourselves. A lot of people say, like, I have no time for myself, right? Like, I have no time. I have no free time whatsoever. That's something people say. It is not true. Whoever you are, it isn't true. And one of the first things I have people do is track their time for a week. I have not met anyone who does not have some discretionary time in their life. Usually what we mean when we say, I have no free time whatsoever, is that I don't have as much free time as I want. But that is a very different story from none, right? Like, so let's not conflate those two stories. And often it turns out people actually have a reasonably large amount of leisure time. The problem is that it is often short in duration. It is unexpected, so you can't necessarily plan for it, or it comes at low energy times, like at night after you've done your chores or the kids have gone to bed. So those three things conspire to make you first reach for screen time, right? If you have maybe 2 minutes of free time, maybe you have 20 minutes. You don't know. You're waiting for the carpool to bring your kids home from soccer or something like that. Or a parent is supposed to call you and they haven't yet, right? Like maybe you have 2 minutes, maybe they're going to call 10 minutes. Who knows, right? So you have some time, but you can't really predict. And so that's why it was like, well, Facebook is fine for 2 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Like you don't have to choose a time in advance. You don't know you're going to have it, right? So if something happens and you wind up with 30 minutes that you weren't counting on, like you can't, given that you weren't counting on it, it's hard to say like, oh, well, I'm going to do this wonderful high quality thing during my 30 minutes. And then of course, late at night, people are just tired. So it's not like you're going to, I don't know, go run a marathon then. So all those things conspire to make screens very easy. And so people look at their screen time tallies. Like if you have an iPhone, it'll tell you what it is. And it'll say something like 3 hours a day. And people are like, no. I am not on reading headlines and on social media, whatever, 3 hours a day. I say, well, it's not lying. Like that wasn't somebody else on your phone. It's just that it comes in these chunks that are uncertain, that, you didn't plan for, that you don't have any energy. And that's what you do. So sorry, that was a long-winded way of getting to this. Effortful before effortless is to challenge yourself to do just a tiny bit of effortful fun before you reach for your screens anytime a spot of potential leisure time appears. So you need to think through what that would be. For a lot of people, it might be reading ebooks. Like if you have an ebook on your phone, you can read that just as easily as you can scroll through headlines or anything else. And if you have those on there, like it's not ideal. I prefer paper books too, but let's be realistic here. Like you don't carry around a book with you all the time and you do have your phone. So you're stuck in the parking lot waiting for somebody. You pull out the phone instead of going to Instagram, start reading your ebook. And again, you don't have to do it forever. The thing with this habit is just challenge yourself to do it for 2 minutes. And then you can go on Instagram for as long as you want, right? Like go watch TikTok dances till, the person actually shows up. But by challenge yourself to do the effortful fun first, one of two things will happen. One, you might get so into your book or whatever other form of effortful fun. You want to do puzzles, you want to do crafts, whatever. You might get so into it that you just keep going and you never wind up switching over to the screen time. But even if you stop after 2 minutes, at least you will have gotten to do both. And because that effortful fun, we're more aware of it, like that it happened. Like you can stop telling yourself the story that I don't have any time. Like it's impossible to say like, oh, I don't have any time when you got through like 80 pages in your ebook in the course of the day, just through these little chunks of time. You're like, oh yeah, well, I read this book today. We're more aware of it. And so the time feels like it actually exists. And so then we can honor it and note that we do have some time for the things that we want to do.
And again, I'm hearing you say more agency. We have all of this agency at our fingertips of how we choose to spend our time. We're just often, like you said, also stuck in these narratives. So we make the same choices that don't actually serve us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not rejuvenating to do most passive leisure. When you choose active leisure for even just a few minutes, then it is usually rejuvenating and you notice it happening. And so then you stop telling yourself the story of having no free time whatsoever.
Right. Because you broke the habit.
You broke the habit.
Yeah, which is awesome. So another rule I wanted to talk about, which I mean, they all tie in so beautifully together, but this idea of taking one night for yourself. And especially as, you are a mom of 5, which I think is so important to point out again here, because a lot of folks that I observe in my world who feel this guilt about taking any time for themselves, but like let alone sleep or effortful fun or any of these things, there's this guilt factor that comes with it that I'm not doing what I'm, quote, supposed to be doing as my role as a mom or as a teacher or as a partner, and I'm doing this thing for myself. So can you talk about how important it is to actually take this night for yourself and how to navigate some of that guilt?
Well, part of this is about switching up your leisure time too. I mean, as I said, people do take time for themselves. They are sitting there scrolling around on Instagram while their kids are playing. Like you are taking time for yourself. What I'm saying is to actually use some of that time to do something that is a little bit more valuable. And the idea of taking one night a week for you is to do a couple of hours each week of something that is not work. It is not caring for family members. It is something that is interesting just for you, right? That you find intrinsically enjoyable. And ideally, you make a commitment to something. Go something that meets at the same time every week. And the reason for that is that then you'll do it, right? Like, if you're like, well, I'm just going to take more bubble baths. Well, then your kid wants you to drive them to the mall. You're like, well, my bathtub isn't going anywhere, right? And so you wind up doing it. Whereas if you are singing in a choir, which is what I do, you're expected to be there on Thursday night at 7:00. Your voice part is counting on you. And so you go. Like you go even if you're tired, you go even if you're busy, you go even if maybe in the abstract somebody would prefer you do something else, because that's the commitment you've made. And so then because it happens, you reap the benefits of this more active form of self-care. As for the guilt, I would encourage anyone who even has some thought of this to, one, track your time. I would suggest that if you are a parent of children who are living in your house, you probably see them a lot. I mean, there are a lot of hours in the week. There are 168 hours in a week. If you are at your school for, 45 of them, if you are sleeping for 56 of them, I'm doing the math here, that comes out to 67 other hours. Likely you are seeing your family for a big chunk of them already. So would it be tragic for you to take 2 to 3 hours away from that 67 to do something else? Well, no. Probably everyone will be okay. And I'd like to point out, like, if you are co-parenting with someone, this is actually a great opportunity for you guys to trade off, right? That each parent can take one night off. And then you do your thing that you want to do. Your partner takes the kids on that night, and then you cover for that person for a night. So you each have the opportunity to both do something that's cool for you and have a little bit more of that focused time with your kids while your partner isn't there. It can be really good for everyone.
And that's a nice model for your kids, too, for them to see their parents actually doing things for themselves.
Yeah, I love kids, too, but I don't think it's a great idea for anyone to have the idea that they are the absolute center of the universe for everyone. So, you can be very important in people's lives and still not be the only thing in somebody's life.
Yeah, and that is really important, again, to just kind of shift the narrative a little bit of what could this look like for me in my life and executing this one night a week thing. What could that be like for my family?
And I'm not sure why it would make anyone feel guilty to have the kids hang out with dad or then mom or whatever for one night a week without you. Like,
yeah, let's change that narrative. We're done with that.
Yeah.
That's over now. So I want to go back to this idea of rule 4, where you say, 3 times a week is a habit. And this idea of, because you just mentioned 168 hours in a week, not looking at the 24-hour day and instead looking at the whole week. And when I first came to your work and, I read 168 hours, that was something that was mind blowing to me. I was like, oh my gosh, look at all of this extra time I have all of a sudden. It was a real game changer. So can you share a little bit about that strategy?
Well, the first thing is to think of life in terms of a week instead of a day. I mean, people often get frustrated because there isn't time for everything they want to do in a day. And I agree, there isn't. But we don't live our lives in days. We live our lives in weeks. And when you look at the whole of the week, you see just how much space we have, right? We just went through those numbers of, if you're working 45 and sleeping 56, you've got 67 hours for other things. So then it's a question of how you're allocating those, for instance. But it's also that things don't have to happen daily. And they don't have to happen at the same time every day in order to count in our lives. And I think some parts of education, this is actually pretty intuitive, right? Like you might say that, if you're teaching elementary school, like music and art are important, but your kids don't go to them every single day, right? Like, you have like maybe twice a week you do this or twice a week you do that. And it's still part of the curriculum. It's just you're not doing it every single day. I think some high school schedules, for instance, have a thing where many of the classes are like 4 times a week and it alternates of how it goes. And so you can fit in a little bit more electives and different forms of curriculum in that. And in many ways, that makes sense, right? Because you're saying it doesn't have to happen every single day. Anything that happens 3 times a week is happening regularly in your life. We could argue about what is the exact number, but I like 3. I think if something is happening 3 times a week, that's pretty frequent, right? Like, it's not like a random occurrence. And the upside of thinking of it this way is many times when people think about the things they would like to have more often in their lives, they're already doing it some. They're not doing it never. They're just doing it not as much as they want. So maybe it's something like family meals. You're like, oh, we never eat together. And then, if you take an honest look at your time, you're like, actually, we probably swing 1 night a week. That's not nothing. That is very far from nothing, in fact. So the question is, well, could you get to 3 family meals a week? All you got to do is add 2. Find 2 times when everyone is around at some point in the rest of those 168 hours. And just like that, you are a family that eats together, right? If you want to practice the piano, yeah, it's not going to fit every single day in your life. If you have this idea of, it's going to be like when you were, I don't know, studying piano seriously when you were 12 and somebody made you practice for an hour every day after school. Like, no, that's probably not happening in your life now. But could you find 20 minutes 3 times a week to play? Like when if you have a little bit of time before some kids get home from activities, maybe you do it then, maybe you do it like some point on the weekend, whatever. 20 minutes 3 times a week is literally 1 hour, 1 hour out of that 168 hours. But it is a regular part of your life. And it's going to start feeling like music is a regular part of your life if you do sit down and practice 3 times.
Yeah. And thank you for using a music example. I fully appreciate that. And, I think sometimes, again, giving into the narrative or I'm going to use the word excuses of the zero-sum game, where, as you just said, it's like, well, we never eat dinner together. Well, but if you really actually took a look at it, you do. And it's not all or nothing. There's this beautiful wiggle room within that 168 hours for growth if you made it a priority.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I had people do this as part of the Tranquility by Tuesday project, I thought about, what they wanted to do more of in their lives and had them think back of when they did this last. I mean, it's well over 80% of people had in fact done it in the last month. So it wasn't never. It was just, again, not as much as I want. And so we're just talking about scaling things up, small tweaks rather than total lifestyle overhauls.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to ask you too, COVID for everybody really changed the way that we looked at things like family dinners, like leisure time, like I think even sleep. And so I want to know, have the lessons that we might have learned in COVID, have they lasted? Are they still sustaining a bit now that we're kind of moving back into this old new space?
Well, it's funny. I don't know if anyone learned any lessons about anything. I mean, there are time diary studies that are done broadly. Like the American Time Use Survey looks at thousands of Americans, asking them to recount yesterday, hour by hour, going through the entire day. This does it rolling over all the days of the year. So you get a very broad perspective of how people spend their time. And so they could compare, say, 2019 with 2020, how people were spending their time. And they're like, over the whole population, I think it was something like people were spending 26 fewer minutes traveling. Again, if you think about the entire population, how varied everyone is, that's a big drop, right? But, what did that get allocated to? Well, people slept a little bit more and they watched more TV. So those are the 2 things that were taking pretty much that entire time over the whole populations. It's not like everyone suddenly discovered exercise or gardening or creative pursuits or spending more time with loved ones. We watched more TV. And then because we didn't have to wake up quite as early to commute in many cases, or in many cases, people were furloughed for a while. So they weren't, for those who had to go into a workplace or otherwise couldn't work, they weren't working for a big chunk of time. And so they were sleeping more because that's what you do. So again, I don't know. There's a fun narrative of like, oh, well, we were all going to spend our time differently as a result. And I don't think it's really true. I do think that for people in certain segments of life, there was a question of moving from your leisure time from passively kind of spending it to like you had all this time with no outside choices, right? There weren't your usual things. There weren't your usual commitments. It wasn't an option to go to many places. And so people were actively coming up with ways to spend leisure time. as opposed to just passively spending it. So then, it's think about Legos and art projects and puzzles and baking bread and all those things. So that's what led to that kind of interest in that. But of course, it is the rare person who couldn't bake a loaf of bread in their life now if they wanted to, right? It's the rare person who couldn't do a Lego set now if they wanted to. I think a lot of people don't because, again, all the other options are there. And so, you worry that you're missing out on something. And so when leisure time does appear, what do we do? Well, whatever's right in front of us. But, if we're good about it, we could certainly come up with other things to do.
Yeah. Okay. That gives me a little bit of hope. It's such an interesting thing to look at. And I am curious still to see the research as it comes out about things like that. But that I think is telling, when you pulled up a mirror, especially like that, I think I'm almost hesitant to say it, but even hearing those results show us maybe where our priorities are.
Well, time is hard to spend well. And, I guess a lot of people in life have said things like, oh, well, I would exercise if only I didn't have this commute. So, well, did you? I don't know. Maybe not. Some people did. And that's good. But, again, time does not magically spend itself on high priority things. We have to make an active choice to do that.
Yeah. And then effort. And something also you had in your book, it was a quote underneath where it said Rule 6. It says, we don't ask where did the time go when we remember where the time went. I love that so much because, again, I think even just reading your books, being present has been really a priority for me because with my own kids, it goes so fast. It goes by so fast. I actually don't feel that. I don't feel that it's going by so fast. Prioritizing being here right now, I know exactly where my time is. And I'm really careful with how I dish out my time, who gets my time, how often they get my time. I don't actually wonder where it went. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, I love that. I hadn't thought about it that way. Can you share a little bit more about that and how you personally experience time?
Yeah, well, I've been tracking my time for 8 years now, basically, in half-hour chunks. That sounds terrible, but I check in three times a day, roughly. Takes me about a minute each time, write down what I've done.
Well, listen, we need people like you to do this, to write the thing so we can do the learning. So,
yeah, well, I can look up how I've spent any half hour of the last 8 years. And the interesting thing is that because of that, I can actually call a lot of those memories back up pretty quickly. Like I pulled out a random week from December of 2016. I saw that I made a trip to Boston and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that trip. And then I was like looking at what I had been doing in the hotel. I was like, oh, and I even can picture that hotel Starbucks that I was waiting for 30 minutes to get my room or where. And I was working there and picture myself sitting at that table and what it looked like in the lobby. And that's still there. Isn't that funny? And when things are still there, then the past doesn't feel like this giant wash. It feels like it happened. But the point of that chapter is actually, I think, a good one. It's one of my favorites, if I'm allowed to have favorite rules, but that we have one big adventure and one little adventure each week. And so much of adult life can become very routine. And there's nothing wrong with routines. Routines are great. Like, teachers who have good routines probably get more good work out of their students because everyone knows what to expect and they can have an orderly classroom. But when too much routine stacks up, whole years just sort of disappear into these memory sinkholes where you no day or no week is distinguishable from any other. And one way to combat that is to plan in one big adventure and one little adventure each week. So a big adventure could be like 3 to 4 hours, half a weekend day. A little adventure could be less than an hour. So you could do it on a weekday evening, even just as long as it is something out of the ordinary. And again, we're only talking 2 adventures a week. This is not enough to exhaust or bankrupt anyone, but it is enough to make it feel slightly different. It's like, oh, that week wasn't the same as any ever. That was like, well, that's the week that we tried that new gelato place that just opened for summer, right? That's the week that we went hiking in that state park that we've, lived an hour away from for 6 years and haven't visited yet. Those are things that would make the week feel different, feel more memorable. And when time is memorable, then we remember it. And we don't ask, where did the time go, when we remember where the time went.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be expensive or ornate. It's just changing it. I mean, your brain seeks out novelty. Your brain needs novelty. And that is really such a simple way to add that novelty throughout your week. It's fantastic. So as we're kind of closing up the interview, I need to ask the question that I ask everybody. And from your perspective and the work that you do, what is your dream for the future of education?
I always hope that kids will feel that their time is being used well. And I think that unfortunately, there can feel a lot of, sometimes in school, like kids aren't using their time well, either that they don't understand stuff. And so it's hard. They feel disengaged from things, or else it's too easy, and they're not paying attention then because they're just passing the time because they've already learned it in the first little bit of the class. And now you have to get through the rest of the class. And so they're bored. And, that feeling of like having to be there for a certain number of hours, but not feeling like the stuff filled those hours is, it's kind of a waste. And yeah, I mean, kids need to learn, but I wish there was some way to make sure that people were kind of challenged to the extent of their capabilities and felt like they were using that time all really well because they were constantly learning. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm sure it could look lots of different ways, but from a time perspective, that's something that always comes to mind for me.
I love that. Well, and the idea of that question is always, when we say our dreams out loud, I think we're just closer to making them a reality, whatever that ends up looking like. So thank you so much for your time. And please, can you share where people can get to know more about you? All of the links that you'll share right now are going to be at the bottom of the show notes. But I'd love for the folks who are just listening, who don't have access to it safely right now, how can they find more about you?
Yeah, you can come visit my website, which is lauravanderkam.com. That's just my name. And there you can learn more about Tranquility by Tuesday, which is my most recent book and all the other ones I've written. And you can get information about my 2 podcasts. Before Breakfast is a short every weekday morning tip, help take your day from great to awesome. So, you can listen to it while you're putting on your makeup or, making your coffee or whatever it is you do in the morning. It won't take much time, 5 minutes, but hopefully give you something for the day. And Best of Both Worlds is a podcast I do with my friend Sarah. We look at issues of work and family from the perspective of people who truly enjoy both.
Awesome. Yes, and all of those links will be there. Please, if you're listening, make sure that you grab Laura's latest book. It is fantastic, and definitely share it with a friend, and then let me know and let her know what you think and how it's working for you in your life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if you loved today's episode, please make sure you write a great review and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Take Notes. And we'll see you next time.
Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.